Good morning, everyone. Glad you could be with us. I'm Tyler, your bulletproof pastor. For those who are watching on replay or just joining us for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're here. Let's say good morning to those in the house. Pepper Leah, the first one in. Alicia, Melissa, congratulations on your new house, Faith and Family. Lewis Log Cabin, Pepper Leah. Oh, I got you already. But good morning again. Sally H., good morning. Southern Prairie Homestead. Did I miss anybody? Not trying to miss you. Monica Sherman, good morning. All right. Okay, I think we're good. This might make the microphone sound a little better. I'll bring it up a little closer. All right. Good morning, everybody. Glad you're here. Glad you could make it. We are in the book of Esther, chapter 4. There is so much good stuff in this whole book, and every time I read it, it's a different time in my life, and every time I read a book or read a portion of scripture, it applies differently to the life I'm living. And there's so much that applies to everyday living and to current events. And boy, I'm having a hard time here. I'm really messing up. I'm trying to get my notes to sync on the screen where they belong, and I think I got it. Anyway, we're in Esther chapter 4, and the things of the book of Esther that didn't apply or wouldn't have even thought of a year ago or 2 years ago are somehow very vibrantly alive today. And man, God just brings the word is living, and he brings the word alive to us every day. Esther chapter 4, and I'm reading out of the King James Version if you're following along. Someone says, why do you read the King James? Well, I said, well, if it was good enough for the Apostle Paul, it's good enough for me. Uh, no, I do it because I have studied textual origin and where our Bible versions do come from, and I have far less difficulty with the language changes that have made some of the meanings of words a little different. I go back, and when I find something like that doesn't ring right with me, I go back and study the original languages and find out what the meaning of that is, and walk away with a far better understanding from having dived in and dug a little deeper. So it works for me, and and I do know some of the functions of the original text. I can manipulate my way around the Greek, and a little more than just being able to pronounce the words. I can actually read it and understand a little bit of it, and I understand the nature and the flow of modern translations, and there's a bigger difference than you even think. So, anyway, I do know that the King James is a trustworthy translation of the original Greek and Hebrew text of what we're calling the original text. Of course, we don't have any of the originals. They were copied thousands of times, and we have literally thousands of copies of those manuscripts that all agree and have been consolidated in what we call the majority text. Then there are various other texts that have many differences between those and the majority text, and those are where the majority of our translations come from. So it's a little. I'll stick with the one that represents the majority, came from the majority, and doesn't deviate to other translations. But I digress. Esther chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done. You remember what Mordecai, let's just back up. Mordecai is a Jew. He's living in a Medo-Persian empire, because you remember the Babylonians came in and took away Israel captive into Babylon. Then the Babylonian king was overthrown by the Medo-Persian king. So the Jews are sort of the baggage that keeps coming along with these kingdoms. And they are subjects of the Medo-Persian Empire here, but it's a very diverse culture. There are many different cultures there, because the Babylonians and the Persians, they went out and they conquered and they brought in captives of all of the lands. And so you've got different ethnic groups there. And there are those who are enemies of the Jews living in the same community as the Jews. And there is a guy named Haman who he's wiggled his way up into prominence in the kingdom, second only to the king, and has buttered him up and smooshed him over. And the king is pretty easy to manipulate, and he's not a real wise king. And so Haman was able to, by subtlety, to acquire authority with the king's authority to go out and to destroy all the Jews. Why? Well, because of his own pride. Because Mordecai, because he was a Jew, could not bow and do reverence to Haman as he walked by. And he was, it was only the Jews that did that. And so Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. So he goes before the king and he tells the king, hey, there's people here that don't follow your rules. They don't respect your name. It's not to the king's good that they even be here. I'll give 10,000 pieces of silver into your treasury to do it. Just let me go out, give me the authority, and I'll go out and wipe all these people out and cleanse your kingdom of these pestilent people. Well, the king doesn't even look into it. He just gives him his ring and says, go do it. And this is not a good king. This is a king that listens, easily swayed, can easily be deceived, and then acts impulsively and without real regard. So Mordecai has now perceived, he's seen these letters that have gone out into all the kingdoms saying that on such a day in December, the Jews are going to be an open prey. And anyone who kills the Jews will be not only protected by the kingdom, but all of that person's possessions are up as a prey, as a prize to the ones who kill them. Now that's pretty wicked, but that's what went on. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, what did he do? Well, he got together with all of his buds and he said, we're not going to have this. Let's get us a bunch of swords and M16s and hand grenades, and we're going to defend ourselves. That's too much the way we think, isn't it? That's what we would do. We would tend to organize and make a stand and defend ourselves. That's not what Mordecai did. Mordecai rent his clothes, meaning he was a sign of grief. He tore his clothes, he got on his face and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. You know what I get from this? Our defense is always in the Lord. When we try to take up our own defense, we find that our hands are weak and our powers are small. But when we find adversity coming to us, the first thing we need to do is to go before the Lord. I had a time in my Boeing career. I worked on these teams. I was a computing data analyst, and I was a lot of different things: systems analysis, computing data analysis, and I was what you call one of the skills that I had learned was called data modeling, and not everybody had those skills. So I was sort of on loan at many times to other teams that needed a data modeler. So I would go in and provide these services. There was a person that I was assigned to assist, and what I didn't know was that he was grossly behind on his deliverables, the things that he was commissioned to do. And when he was called into question for it, he laid the blame entirely on me, saying that I was the one who was slowing up his progress, that he would give me an assignment and the assignment would not come back until, way late. It would just take forever to get this job done. And I was the reason that was slowing up his progress. Unlike the king Xerxes here, the manager who was over both of us said, okay, called me in with that other person, explained the accusation, and said, what I want you to do is whenever you have an assignment you want to give to Tyler, you give that to me. I will give it to Tyler. Tyler, you get the job done. You give me your results, and I will pass the results back. I'm going to be the clock. I'm going to be the timekeeper, and I will watch and see if this is done or not. And evidently, when these accusations came, the first thing I did in my heart was just throw my hands up to God. Not really, not in flesh, because I was sitting in an office, but in my heart, I threw my hands up to God and say, God, you are my defense and my mighty shield. And that's when this other answer came out, that this manager was going to be the go-between. And in very short order, it was found that my deliverables were not only timely, but incredibly fast, faster than would normally be expected, and that this person was still falling behind on their deliverables. So the blame ended up going right where it belonged, and I was not only exonerated but credited for good workmanship. But it is so easy to mount up a defense and say, that's not so, I'm being framed, and all of these terrible things. But God has a way of turning things around his way, and he turns them around for his glory, and he will always defend his people. And this is what Mordecai understood too. The people of Israel were God's care. God has promises for the people of Israel. If all of the Hebrews were destroyed, then God's promises have fallen slack, and that's not going to happen. So he, knowing that God will venerate his people, he came and prayed before God. He went to God with his problem and let God be his defense. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her, you're right, Faith and Family, Melissa, it's right. It's hard to keep our flesh from rising up. It is so easy to get angry and to let our flesh rise up. But here is a great example. Mordecai, he just fell flat on his face before God. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent Raman to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not. He said, "No, no, I'm in. It's not time to put on happy clothes. It's not. This is time for grieving." Then called Esther for Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. Tell me, why are you in sackcloth and ashes? So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which is before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, and to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. Remember, Mordecai had said to Esther not to show her people, not at this time. There will be a time when it is appropriate, but it is not now. Now it is appropriate. Now Mordecai, who raised Esther, is telling her, it's time. You need to go before the king, show your people, and to declare to the king what this plot is to destroy all of the Jews in his kingdom. And Hatach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hatach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. Now look at this. You're seeing a little bit about the weakness of this king. He is morally, as well as a leader, he is vacant in a lot of skills he should have, but also morally he is. And remember, he had that, he's got a harem of, I don't know how many, but at least hundreds of concubines. And then they had a second gathering of virgins around the kingdom. So this guy is really kind of stuck on himself, and he's not tending to the work of being a king. But look at this. Verse 11, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. She has gone 30 days without even seeing the king. This is supposedly the queen. And the king gets so wrapped up in all kinds of other things that he doesn't even give attendance to his own wife, his queen. And 30 days, and I don't know what he's doing, but it might involve that harem. I can't tell you what he's doing, but this king is not a great king. And Esther is in a position she had no choice of, but she's married to him. But I want to point out one more thing. Esther, to enter into the king's inner chamber where the king is sitting on the throne, probably while he's busy doing other business of the kingdom, if she enters into that and the king just ignores her, then without any other orders, the orders are already standing, the guards will take Queen Esther out and kill her. because that is the law. The only exception is if the king holds out his golden scepter to point towards her, and that is sort of like extending mercy and extending grace to spare her life and to grant her admission. Now that's pretty potent. But think about that. We, apart from the grace that is shown to us through Jesus Christ on the cross, we can't enter into God's holiness. We can't go into the inner chamber of God. Think about the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies. The high priest could only go in there once a year. And if he ever went into that Holy of Holies unbidden, he would be struck dead. And here, Esther, in a similar way, is going to enter into that inner chamber where the king is, and she's not been bidden. It's not that she hasn't been called. So she's not reporting to an appointment. She's just showing up unannounced. And if the king isn't in a good mood, she could die. She could be killed. This is a serious, serious thing. And they told Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther. And this is so powerful here. This applies to our lives and our calling. Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. Because you see, God is in charge here. Not you, not me. God has called for the Jews to be a special people unto him. And if you don't stand up and do your part, God will raise up somebody else. But you're going to be the loser. And I might add this, there are those who say, if God has called you to be a missionary and you fail the call or do not answer the call, then the souls of thousands may rest upon your head. That's nonsense. God is not going to let the souls of thousands perish at your failures. Now, I will tell you that if you don't answer the call to be of service to God, if God calls you and you do not answer that call or you do not submit, then you have forfeited a great blessing. And that blessing will be passed to someone else. And someone else will do God's work. God is the one responsible, and God is the one who has called for these lost souls who will receive Christ to be saved. And he will do it through another means if you don't. So, enlargement or deliverance will arise from another place if you don't do it. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? This is a powerful quote that's used to apply to many, many things. This is the time. What was the Reagan quote? I know part of it was if not now, then when? Who should stand up? If it's not them, then it's, I forget the exact quote. Maybe you remember it, but part of it was, if the time isn't now, then when is it? And here it is, for such a time as this. This is the time. This is the moment we need to act. This is the time we need to rise up. And let me grab this. Yes, Melissa, you're right. We want to be very keen to hearing God and doing and pursuing what he is calling us to do. And that is so true. So Esther chews on that for a little bit and sends back word to Mordecai Verse 15. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer: Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. And she did. Pepperleah, you're right. You get the golden buzzer here. If not us, who? If not now, when? That is so true. Thank you, Pepperleah. That is good. That is what we needed. We need to be the ones to stand up. We need to be the ones that go bold. Now, at the same time, we need to have God's prayer support. So Esther did just the right thing. She committed to, yes, I'm going to do this, but I need your prayers. I want to know that I've got prayer support. And we